Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Juju Show, episode number 24, the Party Down edition. Let's see who we got out here this week. James, you're first up in line. How we doing, James? Mr.
Hey, I'm
Beaver.
doing well, Rick. James Beatty here from People Data Labs. Good to see you guys this week.
Hey, Kevin, how we doing?
Hey, really good. Kevin Monroe here. Happy to be here.
Awesome. And Vitold's going to be our silent observer. He's actually the Juju core engineer that's working on our demo feature highlight of the day, except he's got a little one running around. And so his mission is to just catch me if I say something stupid, hit me over the head with it.
Hello.
Vitold.
Hey.
See what I mean? I didn't say anything stupid yet, so he's not going to come out with anything. All right. Let's get this party started. It's going to be a little bit of a light edition on the community news this week, but I do have one thing I want to call out and highlight. Number one, I was going to call out, hey, we had a release happen over the last 2 weeks. We had 2.2.5 come out. Except then the news today was, hey, 2.2.5 is all busted up. So the long story short of it is that there's a new LTS coming out. I don't know if you all heard or not, but Bionic Beaver, it was going to be 1804. The name was announced and everything. So here at Canonical, we're all getting ready to start our cycle of work towards the next release, which is an LTS, which is awesome because the LTS releases, I know those of us in operating software land, we tend to hop from LTS to LTS for things. Which meant Juju, who was very much respectful of saying, hey, you should run on LTSs, decided to try on Bootstrap to go and bootstrap this brand new Bionic Beaver that doesn't even have a pre-alpha yet, which means it broke. So the team is actively working today on getting a updated release 2.2.6 out, which will not treat Bionic Beaver as an awesome LTS yet and treat it as the very early stage idea of awesome engineers that it actually is. So apologies today for those of you hitting that issue. I know we've got things on the mailing list and IRC and all that about that. Heads up. Now you can cheat if you bootstrap with a flag -- series, you can specify Xenial and it'll work. And if you deploy your charms, if you just deploy, Postgres, it'll try to deploy Postgres potentially on Bionic, which you don't want. So you need to specify the series either with a -- series flag, or in the charm URL, you can do CS : series names, in this case, Xenial / name of your charm. So explicit's always better because it would help with some of this stuff. But this is totally on us and the team, and you can be sure that we'll be making sure this doesn't happen again in this way. Those things that come around every 2 years, it's like a eclipse or something, and then you're like, oh shoot, I should be ready for that. Dope. So all right, so look for 2.2.6 coming soon, like hopefully end of day soon, or beginning of your morning soon if you're out in Europe somewhere. Next up, we had an interesting question. I'm going to classify this as the beginner question of the week, but it really isn't a beginner question, so I got to give them more props than that. And what it was is we had a user who was trying to run open ports command on some machines. And open port is what a charm uses to open firewall rules to be able to access, provide network access to services that are running. So whenever you expose something, what it's actually doing is the charm is running open port, and expose just lets that go through and happen. So when you say Juju expose my web app, and now it's available on port 80, what it's doing is in a hook in there's a script that runs that says open the port 80. So this user wanted to do this manually through the Juju run command. It was hitting an issue because it kept finding out that open port wasn't available as a command to run. And they went, I'm confused. There's this open port command, but it won't find it. And what it comes down to is this really tricky, interesting thing is that when you use Juju run, by default, it works at the machine level. So if I Juju run on a machine, it's only going to do machine. It's going to basically run the command on the machine itself. If you run at an application, if you use -- application or -- unit, and you target something that Juju I don't know. That's more of a Jujuism, I guess. At that point, it'll actually load additional context into the environment, the shell environment that run command runs in, and in that time you get these Juju specific commands like open port loaded up. So for the user, it basically meant your Juju run command needed to be Juju run -- application something, and then your open port, and it would work out just peachy. So I thought it was a really interesting one because it's one that I've used, but not really, I haven't really stopped and thought about. And when it didn't work for them, I was also like, oh, yeah, that should work, until it got into the details of, why sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. So there you go. Other than that, there wasn't a whole lot on the mailing list for the last couple of weeks. So let's jump in to our main topic. So who here knows what the fan is? All right. So basically, there's this lovely problem we have in operating software across different cloud providers, and it really comes down to networking. So I'm going to show you guys something that I've got running here, and it's time to get the screen share on. Ooh, not that window, not that window. Where'd it go? I have too many windows. All right, can everyone see my lovely terminal? And actually, I should jack this thing up a bit. Why didn't I not do that ahead of time like normal? Bigger terminal. All right, let's run status. Let's see what I've got here. Whoa, I got a lot of stuff. So what I've got here, I'm going to scroll up here, is I have a model called MazFan2, and it's running on my Maz at home. And my Maz at home has kind of a flat network where all the machines are. And I've deployed 3 different things: haproxy, mysql, and WordPress, right? So this is your standard little blog setup where you haproxy multiple WordPress nodes behind it. And in looking at this, the thing I want to focus on are these IP addresses. Notice that I put haproxy, mysql, I've deployed them, but what they actually turned into, here, let me widen this a little bit more so that hopefully it won't wrap. Come on, no wrapping. Oh. What I've got here is some of this stuff is in containers, right? So I'm only using 3 machines, but I've got multi-nodes, MySQL, multi-node, WordPress, because I stuck them inside of containers. And when the containers come up, they fetch a DHCP address from basically from Maz, who's running DHCP on the network, right? So even though these things are in containers, they have a kind of root level, subnet level addresses on the main network. So they can all communicate and talk to each other without any kind of special natting or routing or anything like that takes place, right? Maz helps take care of this with Juju's help. The 2 of them work together to make sure that any of these containers can talk to any other containers, even across machines, which normally you would think you'd have to do some sort of natting, routing setup on them. It's all kind of handled for you, it's nice because you don't have to think about it. You just deploy stuff. You can make things really dense. So like I've only got 8 machines. If I want to deploy something big, oftentimes I have to condense it down and put them in containers so that I can, manage that. The problem is if I dump this model out into a bundle file and then try to reuse it somewhere else. So let's say I'm going to deploy this now on AWS and have the same exact setup. What worked in one provider on one end on Maz will now fail me on AWS. And the reason comes down to the networking. AWS will not give me an individual, unique, kind of root level IP address on the same subnet for each container that I create on AWS. So you only get 1 for each of those VMs. Now, you can do things like add additional interfaces, and you can, but there's still limitations in all that. And it's kind of a mess to work on. So what the team's done is Canonical has this cool tool, what we call the fan. And I want to go switch over to the fan, which is the same thing deployed on AWS. And what you'll notice in this case is these addresses are funky. They don't match up at all. Right? So you can see the containers have these 252 addresses, that the machines themselves have these 52 addresses. But what's happened is the fan is a way of, it adds an additional interface. Where's my Juju run? Don't I have one here? What did I do? Juju run -- machine 1. and I want to run IP adder show, I believe. See what this pulls up. Voila. So what the fan does is it creates, there's another device here, and there's this fan 252, and it adds this to everything in the model. So all the containers come up with an interface that has an address in the space. And here you can see that here's the actual like subnet for this. It's a little /8 subnet space here. And so what it means is that all of these things that I have running can communicate to each other. Now it's limited with working within the model, right? So between each of the containers and each of the machines in the model, they can now all communicate with each other, including if they overlap on ports. So like, let's say I've got two WordPresses, they both come up on port 80. I don't want to have any issue where I can't run multiple things on port 80 because only one of them's allowed per machine and all that, right? So they're all unique addresses. They all can come up on whatever ports they want, and they can all communicate with each other. The only thing now is that there's only so much public space out. So if I want to then expose this, 2-node WordPress blog out through haproxy, then that's the actual public interface. This is the only thing that's exposed out to the public internet is haproxy. Now, let's see, where's my model config? The way this works is through a model config setting, and it's called the fan config. And what this is it defines the subnet definition for what the fan will use as far as a network. So if I create 10 models, I can actually use different subnet definitions so that they're all unique amongst each other. And then...
So, quick question. Does that 172.31 address space correspond to the AWS subnet?
No, because I don't think that was in any of them. Now, if I show machine 1, there is nothing 172 in here. So, right. So VTOL over here reminds me. This is taken, there's a requirement. For this to work in AWS, you have to have a VPC. And so that 172 is the VPC subnet. And the second one is the fan subnet that's actually being used for the communication across them. So Juju's doing some magic setting up and configuring of my VPC in AWS to help make all this work.
Awesome.
And I'll be 100% honest. As far as defining those, VTOL here, my lovely engineer friend, gave it to me, and I hadn't gone through how to think up my own definitions on a second VPC with a different subnet and stuff yet. And that's where things like documentation will be amazingly awesome, and I will look forward to reading that as this comes out. This is a feature that's built into Juju 2.3, which is currently in beta 1, hopefully heading towards beta 2 this week. And right now it works in AWS out of the box. And before 2.3 is released, I believe it'll work in GCE, and there's work going on to enable it in other providers as well. OpenStack is on the list. Now, because it gets into manipulating and kind of getting at the specific network functionalities within the provider, it's not generic, right? Like you have to implement it one provider at a time. So what you'll probably see in 2.3 is that it'll support a big chunk of the providers in Juju, but probably not all of them, at least not out of the box. You'll have to do some additional configuration and some manual bits to make it work anywhere else. So James, I was talking to you about this, and you got kind of excited. Can you tell us why your use case is kind of more interesting and compelling than my own here?
Yeah, gosh, I think that, this is really applicable to many use cases, but yeah, I don't even know where to start. I started fooling around with it a little bit with the Ceph deploy, and I just thought it was really, really sweet how I could deploy my Ceph monitors into LXD containers and kind of co-locate those on my Ceph OSD machines, and have everything be able to talk to each other. And I was able to stand up a really decent looking Ceph deploy seamlessly in AWS, using the Juju storage feature to just attach some OSD drives and some journal drives, and then using our new fan networking to get the LexD monitor cluster to all talk to each other and to talk to the OSDs via the fan network. I mean, it was the first time I really pulled it up and tried to play with it, and it just seemed to work really well. So, God, so exciting. Thanks a lot, man.
VTOL's done a lot of work to make this work really out of the box. I didn't actually have to set up that fan config on AWS because Juju just automatically pulled that out for me. And that's for some of the manual stuff you'd have to do on other things right now. I think the biggest takeaway I want everyone to make sure is, like, anytime you have more than one unit of something that would conflict, if they're in containers, then they wouldn't be able to reach out to the rest of the of the model. Big use cases would be having HA components in any type of microservice architecture, where you've got three of this web app, three of that web app, three of this, middleware for processing jobs queues and all that kind of stuff, right? Basically, might have to put them all on individual small machines, and you'd use small VMs or instance types in the cloud. What this lets you do is grab a larger instance type and stick them all in containers and not have to worry about the routability of them as much, because they'll all be able to reach each other to provide the service that this microservice architecture is providing, right? Like, it's built to provide. And so anywhere where you've got things like that, you can stick one of each type of microservice onto one larger instance type, and then have three of them. So in three instances, you can, spin up something that holds 6, 8 or whatever containers inside, and really leverage that density. So it really is a density story. And then for us, it's the big thing is trying to make sure that your models are consistent. That if you have a model that works in one provider, MAS means that I have to have a rack of servers downstairs. If I want to test it outside of the MAS and see, will this work and all that, it's nice that I can spend a few bucks on AWS to do a test run and not require folks to give up real hardware sitting in a rack in order for me to do that test, and have faith that it's testing close to what's actually occurring in the other in the other provider, the other substrate. So kind of exciting stuff. What do you think, Kevin?
And my mute button. I'm a huge +1. I don't know. The fan's been around for what, a year now ish.
Something like
and just that addressability across, just like you said, across models into containers makes it so nice.
And we'll have some folks that will definitely push up on the, you could stick some of this stuff in Kubernetes and have dozens of them, and then let the Kubernetes layer deal with the kind of routing you need. But the other nice thing is these are true LexD machine containers, and so what's really nice is that you can get full, like, hardware pass-through mappings of things. The GPU support in some situations. There's needs. Obviously, there's need to get closer to the machine, and a LexD machine container will get you closer than sticking things on top of a Kubernetes infrastructure that you may or may not have running yet to solve this similar problem, right? I don't notice nowhere in here do I have another few machines set up running Kubernetes for myself or whatever as well. Well, there you go. That's our demo and kind of feature for upcoming Juju 2.3 highlight today. Go get your Juju on. Try out the snap. You can use the snap command to go and grab something from the beta or the edge channel and test out these latest features. What's nice is you can then use snap to switch back to stable when you need to, and so you can play around when you need and switch back to stable when you're done tinkering. But give it a try, file your bugs, see where we can leverage these types of new features in your existing environments, and let us know what you think. And next time you see VTOL somewhere at a sprint or something, make sure to buy them a beer or 3.
Rick, what's the 2.3 release cycle look like? I know
it looks like all release cycles. So I'll be honest. There's a little bit of at one point there was an email that went out to the list that we'll just own it, right, about a beta a week. That was a couple of weeks ago. So I think that the team is really actively trying to get beta 2 out this week. What's been good is we've had some bugs filed and some folks beating on it, but the more the merrier. I do know I'm engaged with trying to get a 2.3 beta Jazz put together. What we're looking at doing is having a hosted setup on this, so you can play with testing your charms out and testing different scenarios on a Jazz hosted controller for yourself. That will be just one less thing to manage. And we're hoping that that will encourage folks to beat on 2.3 and get some more test usage and stuff out there. So look for news of that to hit the mailing list in the next weekish time. And from there, it's mainly a amount of how confident we get, right? You know, the more people that use it, the more bugs we get squashed and put away, the better we feel about going to RC and locking it down. So other than that, I honestly don't know how close we are to actually trying to lock down to an RC.
Okay.
Obviously, today's 2.2.5 Bionic Beaver, I think, put a little dent in everyone's attention today. But hopefully soon. I definitely think we should, be trying to target it out before the end of the year. Would be my hope for sure. Like final, through RCs after another month or so. All righty. Everyone, go give it a try. And if you need anything, find us in IRC. We are at #Juju on Freenode and on the Juju mailing list. And you can find me on Twitter at MyTechie and make lots of noise. Have a good day.
Thanks, guys.